Watch friends, today we're going to take a look at a pair of NTH or nth, like nth degree, Barracudas. First, I would like to thank a channel subscriber and a personal friend for sending these in for a review. Really appreciate it. This is my first time checking out the brand and I've been curious about them for a while, so I'm glad to have a detailed look at them. So right off the bat, you can tell that these certainly are inspired by Submariners, or I would even more closely associate them with the Tudor Black Bays or the Black Bay 58. And as we'll see as we go through here, the specs are kind of really in the middle between the two, though they're thinner than even the Black Bay 58. But before we dive into those, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the packaging. So you'll notice these are the outer sleeves. And the reason these two are different is this blue one is an older variant of the Barracuda, or an older iteration. So the packaging has been updated on the black version, so I believe it is standardized to this now for outer slip. But what's really cool is inside you have this nice, I'm assuming this is a faux or a PU leather here. And this actually, it's an interesting mechanism. So this slides out and the watch is housed, folded down here, covered with protection, and you have the watch links down in there once those are removed. But this is really nice packaging, relatively simplistic, but very cool overall, and it's definitely a unique style from anything I've seen before. So with these, you'll notice that there's going to be a number of differences between the two other than the colorway. So these do have subtleties. They're not all just associated with the difference in terms of generation. These have two very different dial applications. So we'll be looking at those in detail, as well as look at some comparisons and look through other things like we always do. If you know this channel, you know I'm about detail. Alright, so let's initially get the specs out of the way. First off, you can see, of course, these are two different bracelets, but we'll share the common specs. So overall, this is going to be coming in at a 40mm case, so it is going to be a nice moderate size for most individuals. This has 20mm lugs, so it is standardized for ease of strap changes. For lug to lug, this is coming in at 48mm, and then on the on the oyster version, with the male end links here, that's coming in right about 52mm for that. So with the beads of rice, you can see no extension past, so that's going to be right at your flat 48. So if you have smaller wrist, certainly the beads of rice is going to be a little more small wrist friendly, though as we'll see, I think both of them work very well. The thickness. This is one of the big reasons why I differentiate this from the Black Bays. And if you see any surface wear on this, as I mentioned, these are loaned to the channel, so these did come in used. So don't fault the company for that. These have seen some loving. They're still in great condition overall, but you might see some little marks throughout. So I do want to point that out. The thickness, though, this is the main piece that I want to focus on. So you'll notice this case, I'm sure you can pick up on this, it's very thin. In total, on calipers, this is coming in at just 11.4mm. They state, I believe, 11.5. I got slightly less than that. So that is a big difference there, even compared to the smaller Black Bay 58. So in and of itself, certainly, this is not designed to be a clone of those watches, and there are a number of other differences as well. For the crystal, if you can see here, this has just ever so slight of a dome to that. So it is technically classified as a double dome sapphire, and it does have an inner AR coating, but it, of course, again, is a very slight dome, so it definitely keeps it from being as boring as a flat, though flats certainly can be good as well, but it is a very subtle dome. The movement on these are actually available with and without a date window. The ones with a date window come with the Miyota 9015, which if you know the channel, you know I'm personally a big Miyota fan. And then the ones without the date window come with a 90S5 for that. I want to say the 9039. It, for all intents and purposes, is very similar to the 9039. Both of those are going to be no date, so they won't have a phantom for that. And these are regulated beyond standard Miyota specs. They're going to come in at -5 to +15 for regulation out of the box. Additionally, the water resistance on both of these is going to be standardized at 300 meters or 30 atmospheres, so you have plenty of water resistance for a dive style watch, as you would expect. Getting into the weight, there is a difference between these two. It's not huge, but it's appreciable. This one is coming in size to my 6.5-inch wrist at 140.2, so that's the oyster, and the beads of rice is coming in at 137.5. And we'll talk more about these bracelets. They both are options. This is a standard. This is an optional one that you can exchange when you purchase. So for accessories for these, we already looked at the box, and these come with the bracelets. That's basically it for accessories as far as I'm aware, or at least that's how I received them, and I could not find anything to the contrary on their website. So certainly adequate for a presentation, but it is fairly minimal there, no extra accessories. For warranty, this is kind of cool. This one comes with not only a 2-year warranty, which is on the longer side, though somewhat common for micro brands, but they have a neat 6-in-6 warranty, as they refer to it. So you have 2-year warranty for the entire watch, then you have 6 weeks to return, and you also have 6 years warranty on the movement. So that's a pretty cool little touch there. Miyotas are typically very reliable workhorse movements, so I suspect you'll get that out of them anyways, but it's nice to have that added peace of mind. So now let's go ahead and transition and start looking at some of the individual characteristics of these. So first, the dials. You can see here, this one, this black, this vintage black as it's called, this actually is neither printed nor is it applied indices. This one is what's referred to as a gilt relief dial. What's really neat about that is it is a black enamel, and that's applied where it actually has all of these gaps. So what you're seeing through is actually the sub dial or the base dial. That is not an applied gilt to that. And then they do then print on the loom as well. So it gives a little bit of a different effect. It's kind of neat. It has some of the flatness like you would have with printed, but you still get a little more playfulness with this than you would from a traditional printed dial. And then looking at this one, you can see that this does have traditional applied indices, and this is a gilt pattern for that as well. So you can really see these do present differently, and we'll see that in outdoor footage as well. For the textures here, this one, as I mentioned, is a black enamel. This one is going to be a sunburst, and I can't perceive at least a gradient or fume to that, though it does play with the light a lot with that sunburst. For the date window, you can see this one is color matched with black, whereas this one is not. This one opted for a white date window on the blue dial. Overall, you can see it's a clean application. We've got the logo at the 12 o'clock position. We have the date down at the 6 o'clock position. And I apologize if you're getting some barking in the background. The dogs are kind of wound up today. It's pretty cold outside, so we don't want them to freeze. All right, so with the colors for these, they are available in, of course, obviously the black and blue. Additionally, presently they're available in a brown and a polar white, which I believe is a full loom as well. The dial text is very clean and nicely applied at the 6 o'clock position, and you can see the colors do change depending on the underlying dial, so that's a nice little finishing touch. The loom application for these is going to be C3, and that is throughout. That's including the bezel, and the hands and markers there as well. So that will have nice application of loom, and of course, with Superluminova, should perform well, and we'll see that in the loom shots here shortly. Transitioning over to the actual handset, you can see that the hardware, we've already talked about the difference between the gilt relief versus applied. The handset is going to be the same between the two, and this is, of course, very reminiscent of a Tudor. It has the snowflake style hands for that. The legibility is excellent on these. It is very clean throughout. You can see clearly where these go to. They're well proportioned. The minute hands are just touching the outer minute. The second hand is just touching the outer perimeter of the track. And the hour, especially with having that snowflake, is very pronounced and easy to detect and differentiate there as well. Looking at the bezels, this one is going to come with a 120 click unidirectional bezel. I'm going to stop talking so you can hear this. Nice click to that, and we will talk about here in a minute. You can see me struggling just a little bit to grip, and that's one of the minor gripes that I have with this. It is a little bit hard to actually grab a hold of this bezel. It has great traction, it's just a little bit on the thin side. If that's a concern for you, it's not personally for me, but I do want to mention it. The pip, you can see, is kind of a neat incorporation where the triangle around, it does actually have kind of the cutout there around the pip. I think it is a cool look to it, and it's something that differentiates. The bezel itself, you can see, is kind of a thick, almost coin edge style to that, but it does provide a nice grip. You can see the overall thickness of that, and relative to my fingers, doesn't give you a whole lot of area to grip, but it does have nice traction, especially if you pinch. This bezel insert, while this might look like it's ceramic, this is actually a stainless steel bezel insert, and this one is DLC coated, and this is PVD coated for these. So both of these are going to have stainless steel bezel inserts for them. Transitioning now to the case, you can see that the case here is going to be predominantly brushed. It does have nice polish accents, especially around the lip here, which I always like to break up the case. Additionally, you can see that this case has a relatively flat design to this, and this is, to me, almost reminiscent of like a skin diver. It doesn't look like it has a lot of contour, but on the wrist, when we see those shots, and let's go ahead and actually pop one on so you can get an idea of what that looks like. This really, I think, wears quite nicely on the wrist. It hugs down onto there, and we'll look at this more outside as well when I can get a little more room to stretch my arms. But with this, it really hugs down nicely and fits extremely comfortably and well. Absolutely love that aspect of it. And then additionally, on the side of the case, you might have noticed that this does have drilled lugs, so that, again, very strap change friendly there. Really like that aspect. Transitioning to the crown, this comes in with a 7.2mm crown. This, of course, is signed, and while it may not look like it, I did actually have to throw a UV light on it to make sure and confirm, but this is, in fact, a signed, a lume signed crown there, so this will glow for you. I'm not sure if that's a black lume or what they did there, because it does look darker than I would expect, so I expect that that is likely a black lume, but I have not definitively confirmed that piece there, but suffice it to say, it is signed and loomed. Alright, for the crown, this does have very good traction. As you can see, it is on the larger side. As I mentioned, this is 7.2 millimeters, so it gives you a lot to grip onto. It is a little bit skinny, which is nice because it doesn't have the crown guards, so it does keep it a little tucked in, more into the case and keeps that vintage look to it. The crown. So popping this out, it has zero wobble. I don't think I've ever felt one that had less wobble to it. It is very, very solid. I will say though, as you go through the clicks, especially for that first position, it is a very soft click. It's somewhat hard to even tell that you've actually reached the first click. So that is a small thing to note there as well. This is, of course, a screw-down crown, as you would expect for being a dive-style watch. Transitioning to the case back, you can see the case back here is very minimalist. It's flat, it has simple, clean text, so you don't have anything that's going to be sharp on your wrist. Overall, I think it's sufficiently done and suits the overall design. Additionally, this is, of course, screw down, again, as you'd expect for a dive watch. Now, looking at these bracelets, both of these bracelets are going to be a 20mm, again, at the lug, and then they do taper down, and this is true for both of them, down to 18mm. You'll notice a difference here where the beads of rice is a female end link, whereas the oyster is a male end link. We already talked about that in the lug to lug, but I do want to highlight that while we're looking at these side by side. Both of these are going to come with screw links, so if you prefer that, you're accommodated here. If you prefer pins, sorry, you're out of luck, but I think most people tend to prefer screw in links. As far as the clasps, you might have noticed, flipping these around here, that these have two different clasps. This is an old style clasp. This blue, I was informed, came with an oyster bracelet, but with this clasp, this beads of rice came with a newer style clasp, but the owner preferred the smaller style, so he switched it over. For micro adjustments, you would be getting this newer style, so it's a little bit larger, but it does have 6 micro adjustments on the side there. Overall, both of these I have found certainly the oyster doesn't have quite as much articulation, though look at that. It's still pretty darn impressive at the lugs, especially for having those male end links. It sends it down enough that it does fold flat. So great articulation on those. Very pleased with that. Excuse me. And then as you would expect here with the beads of rice, this, I mean, just has fantastic, it really contours to the wrist and has fantastic articulation all the way around. So that is overall, that's kind of the main specs and some of the observations about the watch. One of the things that I wanted to take a look at though is let's look at these and see how they compare size-wise. So I have a couple other 40mm watches here. This is, if you're familiar with the Zelos Mako, that's what this looks like here. You can see certainly a little more dial presence or a little more bezel presence on this one. So both are 40mm, but you can see kind of what that difference looks like there. And then additionally, going out of the dive style, looking at this next to a Risa Resolute, which this, if you've seen my video, you know that I'm a huge fan of this one as well as the Endeavor, so check those out if you haven't already. Really cool watches, titanium, awesome. But you can see though, with having a field style and a fixed bezel, that certainly has a lot more, even more bezel presence there. So now let's go ahead and take a look at these in some outdoor footage and get these in different lighting, and then afterwards we can go ahead and look at the lume, and then we'll come back for the closing thoughts. Checking these out outside, you start to get a better idea of the contours of the case, as well as you can really start to pick up more of that gilt, get that nice shine as the sun hits it. This gilt relief really is quite a unique dial. It definitely does not appear the same as applied indexes, as you can see here when we look over at the blue one. Those really going around, of course, the beads of rice bracelet itself does have a very different look, really changes it up. But then check out how the light hits those indexes. Really does have a different presentation to it compared to that gilt relief. Now checking out the lume shot, as you can see here, the lume on these does pop quite nicely. The C3 is well applied and it is really quite prominent. Of course, you have the same lume pattern between the two. On the left here, we do have the blue version, and the reason you can tell that is the blue one does have the full triangle pip, whereas the one on the right, you can see where it's red, that is not lume, so that is the main difference between these two. Alright, so there you have it. Hopefully this has given you a pretty good flavor of these, but let's kind of close this out and look at some of the positives and some of the negatives. I've mentioned some of them throughout, but I really want to highlight and sum them up for you. So first off, I would say that this contours perfectly to the wrist. I can't emphasize enough just how comfortable these are. Surprisingly so. I really didn't expect that they were going to feel as nice on the wrist as they do, but they really are spectacular. Additionally, as far as the size, while we saw these, and certainly they are not the biggest 40s in the world, I still think it's a very versatile size. I think it has plenty of overall presence, especially with the bezel there. I think on my 6.5-inch wrist, I think it fits very well. I think it could do smaller, and I think it could go quite a bit larger as well, certainly just depending on your preference. But I think most are going to be happy with the overall size for these watches. Additionally, you can see that these do, obviously, as we've talked about a lot throughout, pay tribute to watches, and they could even be called homages to the Black Bays or what have you. But personally, I don't think that these overstep to where they go into the clone territory. There's plenty of things that differentiate these for overall touches throughout, and I really like that. I'm not too much of I definitely don't do clones at all, and I'm generally not too much of an homage fan, but I do think that both of these were well and tastefully executed throughout. Additionally, the overall quality of these, I found the build quality to be solid across the board. The finishing is nice. Overall, they're just solid watches. All right, so transitioning then to some of the negatives. What didn't I prefer? What critiques do I have with these? So first, the bezel inserts. I mentioned that these are stainless steel bezel inserts. I would have liked to have seen them be ceramic, especially at this price point. I think it would have helped for overall wear resistance. You can see there are just some scuffs and scratches on these. That's something that would absolutely bother me if these were my personal watches. They're not huge deals, and they're not terribly unsightly, and yet they come with tool watches and with wear, but I would have preferred to see ceramic for that. That would have been a nice touch. Additionally, the blue, I would have personally preferred if this had been a color match date wheel, just like it is on the black. I like them to be a little more subdued in overall appearance and not stand out as much as this white does. The crown clicks, we talked about the positions. While the crown itself is excellent, while the movement action is smooth, I would like those. I'm not sure why they're so soft, but it is on both of these that the crown clicks are very, very soft, and I would like to have a little more distinction as you're moving out. It wouldn't be a factor on the no date version, but it is a factor on these date versions. And then additionally, the hand loom. So with this one, particularly on the black, you can kind of see, and this is not uncommon for snowflakes, but you can see right there where the loom, it isn't 100% uniform. You have a little bit of a thin spot there, and you can kind of see it. It's a little thing, but it is something that I do want to point out because it is something that to me is a slight ding or slight negative for it. So overall, in closing, these watches, as we didn't talk about the price. So price-wise, this is an important characteristic for these. So the plain stainless steel with the oyster bracelet is coming in at $700. You can bump up to $725 to get the beads of rice. And then you can bump up to $750 if you go with an oyster that is DLC coated. So you have a range here of $700 to $750. So with that, these certainly are not cheap watches, especially for micro brands, but they're also not insanely priced either. So what do I think about that? Overall, I think they are definitely solid watches. I think you get a fair amount for your money, and I think you get your money's worth. But they by no means are, in my opinion, what I would consider to be a bargain or a steal of a price either. So I think they're fairly priced. I think if you get one, once you actually take on the price, I think you'll be very happy with the end result. And I think overall, you'll be impressed with the build quality. So I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button. I have a lot more content coming. If you enjoyed this, please do also hit that like button. And if you'd like to find me on any other mediums, you can also check out my Instagram feed. Thank you so much. Have a great day.